My name is Michelle Deatrick, and I serve as the National Chair and Founder of the DNC Council on the Environment and Climate Crisis. I'm also the Vice President of the Huron Valley Area Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. I'm a farmer and a battleground state organizer. And I'm sorry I can't be with you in person, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you by video. First and foremost, for the last several years, I've traveled the country listening to people. I've listened in union halls, county commission meetings, town halls, on college campuses, and on front porches in rural towns, suburbs, and major cities. And whether I'm in Michigan, Arizona, North Carolina, or in Florida, I keep hearing the same concerns. People are worried about their electric bills. We're worried about the cost of homeowners insurance. We're worried about hurricanes, flooding, wildfire smoke, and dangerous heat. We're worried about whether our children will be able to afford to stay where they grew up. And increasingly, people are asking hard questions about the massive data centers being built in their communities. Those conversations and the polling make something very clear. Climate is not a niche issue, nor is it one that can be ignored or swept away under the rug, because it is a winning issue. And the reason is people, far more than pundits, understand that climate is connected to affordability, public health, economic security, and the future of their communities. If I ask everyone listening whose electric bill went up this year, whose insurance went up, whose grocery bill went up, I can't see you, but I bet nearly every hand would be in the air. Because as you all know too well, in Florida, these are not abstract policy discussions, they're monthly realities. Whether it's another hurricane season, rising insurance premiums, saltwater intrusion into drinking water, extreme heat that makes outdoor work dangerous, or concerns about keeping the lights on during periods of record electricity demand, Floridians are living at the intersection of the climate crisis and the affordability crisis every single day. People live in monthly budgets, utility bills, and insurance premiums. We live in the difference between what our paycheck covers and what life actually costs. And increasingly, those economic pressures are being shaped by environmental realities. Recent polling reflects what many of us are hearing in our own communities. Majorities of Americans say they want leaders to address affordability and climate together, not as competing priorities, but as connected challenges. Most believe we can lower costs while making progress on clean energy and climate resilience. Large majorities support protecting communities from extreme weather, addressing rising home insurance costs, and investing in cleaner energy sources. And those findings make sense. And they are why Democrats can and should lean in on these issues. After all, there isn't much value in arguing whether climate or affordability is more important when one hurricane can raise your insurance bill by thousands of dollars, or when extreme heat drives electricity demand through the roof. Increasingly, these are the same conversation, and nowhere is that intersection becoming more visible than in the rapid growth of data centers. Artificial intelligence promises opportunities, and innovation is important, but innovation should serve communities, serve people, not the other way around. Across the country, communities are asking reasonable questions. Who pays for the new transmission lines? Who pays when additional generating capacity is required? Who benefits from the tax incentives? Who bears the environmental impacts? And who gets a voice before decisions are made? Those are not anti-technology questions. They're good governance questions. Whether a community ultimately welcomes a project or not, people deserve transparency, meaningful participation, and confidence that costs are not being shifted onto households already struggling with rising utility bills. And that principle extends well beyond data centers. As communities across Florida prepare for stronger storms, hotter summers, aging infrastructure, and rapid population growth, we need to think bigger than the next budget cycle. We need a long-term vision. Because the issue is not whether climate is a winning issue. It is. It's whether we show up with an agenda and vision big and transformative enough to meet the scope and scale of the climate crisis as people are living it. And whether we can tie electoral priorities with issues that we are trusted on. This matters now, and it will be central to our work to win in 2028 and beyond. So let's talk about what we do. Because naming the problem isn't enough. People don't need another speech about how bad things are. We're living how bad things are. What we need is an answer. First, a national infrastructure bank. We cannot keep depending on winning a new appropriations fight every single cycle. We will fight like hell to flip Congress and win the White House, every cycle, every time. But the climate crisis doesn't wait for our election calendar, and neither should the money to fight it. This isn't a new idea. It's an old one we've let ourselves forget. In 1932, Herbert Hoover signed the Reconstruction Finance Corporation law into law. Franklin Roosevelt expanded it. It helped pull this country out of the Depression, capitalizing banks, saving the railroads, creating Fannie Mae. Later, it helped to finance a world war. Today, Congressman Danny K. Davis of Illinois has introduced the National Infrastructure Bank Act with 32 co-sponsors. Our council supports it because climate, labor, and equity are not three separate fights. They're one fight. And it's time our funding structure reflected that. Second, stop the subsidies. Make corporations pay their own way. We're told there's no money for transit. We're told there's no money for battery storage, no money for EV chargers, for the grid that we need. That's not true. There's plenty of money. It's just being handed to the richest companies and the richest executives in the history of the world. Let's start with data centers. There's no single federal data center tax credit to point to and repeal. It's worse than that. It's an uncapped write-off. It's free federal land. Yes, data centers are now going to be built on BLM land with more on the way. It's a waiver of environmental review. It's a voluntary pledge standing in where a rule should be. And when a community manages to say no to the subsidies or even tries to limit them, in my own county here in Michigan, a volunteer township board was cornered into massively subsidizing one of the richest companies on earth. That's the game, and it's rigged. And here's what should make every one of us furious. This year, the Trump administration directed federal agencies to steer these projects, the most water-hungry, power-hungry industry in the world, toward brownfield and Superfund sites, sites that sit disproportionately in Black, brown, and lower-income communities. That's not an accident of geography. That's environmental injustice by design. Why should these companies continue to get massive tax breaks while we fight for scraps? It is long past time to end the subsidies. Third, fix FERC. Most people have never heard of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, FERC, 5 appointed commissioners. But right now, this year, FERC is deciding something that will show up on your electric bill. Whether the companies building these data centers pay for the transmission lines they need, or whether that cost gets spread across every household in the region, including yours. FERC has an Office of Public Participation created by Congress to give ordinary people a seat at the table, authorized in 1978, but it wasn't actually stood up until 2021. Yeah, that's right, 43 years. And right now, when a community group wants to intervene in one of these proceedings, the utility shows up with a room full of lawyers, and the neighborhood shows up with volunteers who took an unpaid day off work and went to Washington, D.C. to be heard. That is not a fair hearing. That's greenwashing dressed up as due process. Fund it, staff it, empower it to cover the costs for the people who show up without a law firm behind them. Us. Fourth, protect ratepayers from the data center build-out and people from the pollution. Making data centers pay for the transmission lines is the start. The next step is simpler still. If you're going to build a data center that swallows the power of a small city, you should have to build the clean power to run it. And there are bills moving right now to do exactly that. Just days ago, the Ratepayer Protection Act cleared the House Energy and Commerce Committee. 52-0, Republicans and Democrats alike, co-sponsored by Florida's own Kathy Castor. That's heading the right direction, but I'll be straight. It asks every state to consider making data centers pay their own way. It doesn't require it, and a company with 100 lawyers can live with consider all day long. The Power for the People Act from Representatives Paul Tonka and Kwesi Mfume, with Senator Chris Van Hollen leading the Senate, doesn't ask nicely. It puts the cost of the build-out where it belongs, on the industry building it, instead of on everybody else's electric bill. Fifth, build. Solar, wind, geothermal, storage, clean, safe, renewable energy is cheaper today than it ever has been in human history. We are not waiting on a technological breakthrough. We know what to do. The only remaining question is whether we have the will to do it at the speed and scale that this moment demands. Needs 2 hands now. 6, reverse the rollbacks starting day 1. And I want to be honest with you about what's been lost, because the deletions matter. The maps and tools that identify communities experiencing environmental and climate burdens. You cannot contest a permit if the government has taken down the map. You cannot regulate an emission that nobody is required to report anymore. Erasing data is the quietest rollback there is, and it's devastating, and it may be the most durable one, which is exactly why our data going forward has to be open, public, and built to survive whoever holds power next. Seventh, put it in the law, not just in the order. So here's the hard truth. Everything built by executive order can be erased by executive order. More than 30 years of environmental justice infrastructure started under George H.W. Bush, built up under both parties, came apart in just a few months under Trump. Not because the country changed its mind, because none of it was ever written into statute. The exception proves the rule. The endangerment finding has survived because touching it took a formal rulemaking and a federal lawsuit, not a signature and a press release. So we need to rewrite our environmental laws for the climate we actually live in and the political culture we actually live in. The Clean Air Act hasn't been meaningfully updated since 1990, the Clean Water Act since 1987. We need to update them. Advisory boards required by law, pollution maps required by law, communities paid to participate instead of expected to donate their labor and their gas money to be heard. Taking away hard-fought climate victories should require an act of Congress, not a tantrum from whoever happens to be sitting in the Oval Office. Folks, I've said it at least 3 times, but I'm going to say it again. Climate is a winning issue. Not because we say so, because people are living it in their bills, in their basements after the storm, in the insurance renewal letter they're afraid to open. We don't have to convince anyone. We don't have to convince anyone that this is real. We have to show up with something big enough to match it. Stuff costs too much is true, but people don't just want to know what we are against. They want to know what we are for. So let's tell them. We're for a country that funds its own future instead of begging for it every 2 years. We're for making the richest companies on earth pay their fair share instead of dumping the bill on somebody's electric statement. We're for a government that shows up at the table for the neighborhood. We're for building solar, wind, storage, grid at the speed this moment actually demands. We're for putting our victories into law so they can't be erased by a single signature ever again. That's not a slogan, that's a plan. I've sat in enough union halls and church basements and front porches to know this. People are not tired of hearing about climate. They're tired of hearing about it from people who won't do anything about it. Let's be the ones who do something about it. Thank you.